Great.
You just want us to get started?
You can if you want to talk
Or
about...
do you want to say something? Oh, you say something.
Oh.
Alexa, say something.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight to Mayhem, Murder, and Mocktails. Just a quick announcement. So October 19th, we have our True Crime Expo. It is our first one ever. It is an all-day event. It starts at 10 o'clock. It goes until 3. We have a lineup of different activities. At 10, it starts off with our author event. We have a couple of true crime authors coming out for a book signing, author panel. So come out, you can ask them questions, you can obtain copies of their books. There will also be a crime professor from Brockport coming to talk about crime and media. And there will be a break in between, so come out so that you can have a quick lunch and then come back so that you can meet with Jennifer Luke from Channel 10, a crime scene investigative reporter. She will be talking about some of the crimes that she has investigated. She will be our keynote speaker, followed by Carrie and Jenny, who will be doing a podcast featuring a retired Rochester police detective.
Was that what we're doing?
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Good to know.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for keeping us up to date, Alexis. That's great.
They will be interviewing someone this
Oh,
time.
cool.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have to...
I feel like she's giving me an assignment. I thought it was something.
All right. Okay.
I thought I just had to show up.
Yeah.
Is registration required?
Registration is required. That way I will know how much food to provide everyone. So, yes, that is live on the calendar. So please register ahead of time.
Limited seating only, right?
It is limited seating only. It will be downstairs in Hamlet A&B, and the book signing after the author panel will be upstairs in the Ewing room. So,
Okay.
Great.
Thanks,
and I will
Alexis.
turn it over to Jenny and Carrie to get started.
Awesome.
So you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. So I'm Carrie Magnan. I'm the circulation supervisor here at the library, and the library's notary public. And
I didn't think you'd share that.
it's on my name tag, so I feel like I have to. And I've been doing this podcast with Jenny for about 1.5 years. We did a podcast last year that was strictly the two of us, and it was on Spotify. You can also watch it on YouTube. And then we started doing it in person this year.
Yep. And I'm Jenny Goodemont. I'm the director here at Wood Library. And we just found out that we like talking about crime. We're at work together.
As most people do.
Yeah. Yep.
And
So-
we've gone to CrimeCon twice.
Yes.
Yeah, which is like a weekend-long crime expo. So we went a year ago. We went to Orlando,
Yep.
and then 9 months later we went to Nashville. We went there at the end of May. That was really great experiences both times.
And then we have Denver coming up.
We have Denver. We're going to CrimeCon in Denver next September. Yeah.
So before we get started, I have one question to ask the crowd. Who watched the Evil Genius documentary since the last podcast? What? Yeah, we got one person.
Remind everybody what you talked about.
It was, so Evil Genius was the documentary that was based on the crime that happened in Erie, Pennsylvania. It was either call it the pizza bomber or the collar bomb.
Yeah.
So you really got to watch that documentary.
Yeah.
You're not welcome back until you do so.
We're going to test you before the True Crime Expo next month. Yeah.
How different is it than the presentation you did here?
Oh, you get a lot more information. Deb, you can attest to that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really.
She corrected me on the number of days it takes to thaw a body. She said, no, it wasn't 3 days, it was 4 days, according to this documentary.
Pretty scary.
So now we know.
You see body.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I'll get started here. Okay, so I asked the question to the people sitting in the front here. Has anybody here heard of the Son of Sam? Raise your hand if you're... Okay, so everybody's familiar. Okay, all right, so everybody's familiar with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And there were just a lot of things happening in New York City at the time of the Son of Sam killings, which we're going to talk about. And we're also going to talk about the Son of Sam. And then we're going to talk about some alternate theories of the crime as well. One alternate theory, really. So let's just jump right into it.
Is it realistic?
So yeah, we'll
Okay.
get to that
All right.
point.
You don't have to answer. Say no more.
So let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Because we always joke around about Amelia Earhart and how people claim that she was abducted by aliens.
Yeah,
I didn't know
I'm a little skeptical on that one. I think it's
a little far-fetched.
A little far-fetched, yeah. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about New York City, right? So I learned a lot more about New York City than I knew before. So there's 5 boroughs in New York City. And the modern New York City, as we know it now, was created at the end of the 19th century. The Son of Sam killings happened in 3 of the 5 boroughs. So basically these 3 here, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. Nothing happened in Manhattan or Staten Island. And just because I like to share fun facts, the most populous borough is Brooklyn with 2.6 million people, and Queens is right behind it with 2. So between those two, there's 5 million people that live there.
I believe it.
And this is according to the census in 2020. The city of New York, which includes all of these boroughs, has a population of just over 8.8 million people. And the total population of New York State is like 20 million. So that is like 44% of the entire population of New York State lives in these 5 boroughs. So a lot of people there, a lot of things going on all the time. Somebody asked, when did the Son of Sam killings, when did this take place? So it actually started in July of 1977.
Oh, 1970s.
Yeah, it was the 7th. I know, it's surprising that I'm doing a crime
Carrie
from the
likes to
70s.
do crimes from the 70s.
I think this is probably my 4th or 5th that I've done from the 70s, but I do think I'm going to branch out for my next one. Yeah, but no promises. No promises. You know, the interesting thing actually about the crimes that we've talked about from the 70s, there is some relevance to today, because we talked about Patty Hearst. That was one of the first ones that we did. And that was still in the news. And then we talked about Charles Manson because Leslie Van Houten was just released out of prison, like last year.
Yeah.
And there's going to be something that we talk about here tonight that just happened in May of this year.
So are you saying that the crimes I discussed from the 90s and the 2000s are out of date in a way, and yours are
Yeah,
trendy?
it's surprising that these happened so long ago, but there is still some relevance to what's going on today.
No, I know.
So anyway, so they began in 1976, and there were killings in the Bronx, Queens, and Long Island. And they tended to be people that were together, and it was like a couple, not a romantic couple, but just 2 people together, and they were shot. Just kind of out of the blue. These people here in Long Island, they were just hanging out on the front porch, and this guy just appeared out of the blue and just shot them both, paralyzed one of them. And even then, even when these .44 caliber killings began in 1976, there were some different people saw different things about the attackers. Some described them different ways, right? So this one here in 1976 was described by a blonde-haired man running away. And we're going to talk a little bit about the discrepancies between the composite drawings as well. So this is when the killings began. So 1977.
So I'm sorry, was the one person that, was there only one person out of that survived?
So the first killing, or the first incident, 2 people shot, 1 survived, 1 died instantly. She was shot in the head. The next attack, both of them were shot, but both survived.
Okay.
Neither of them saw anybody. They were just sitting in a car, and they just were shot. And then the 2 women, young women who were sitting on their porch, they both survived, and 1 was a paraplegic for
Okay,
life.
all right.
So then the new year starts. We go into 1977. And the city is really starting to get very nervous about, because these killings are just very random, very unexpected, out of the blue. Again, starts in January. 2 people were shot while waiting in a car at the Long Island Railroad station. And the woman survived long enough to be interviewed, or at least ask some questions, but neither of them said anything about the attacker. And this one in March of 1977 in Queens is the one that was the crime that they were able to tie to the other. They got bullets from the other attacks and tied them all together. And so they created this task force called Operation Omega, and it was started by the NYPD after the killing of this young woman who was, I think she was 19, and she was just walking home from a night school class, and she was shot. In April 1977, a couple was shot while sitting in their car. The police had a couple theories that some of these couples were on what they would call like a lover's lane. And the women tended to have dark brown hair, long brown hair. So actually around this time, in like the late spring, early summer of 1977, there was a total craze in New York City. Women with brown hair were dyeing their hair, cutting their hair, wearing wigs, because they were afraid that the killer was after women with longer hair, dark hair. June of actually, let me go back to this one. In April 1977, that incident, there was a letter left behind that shooting, that killing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then there was another one in June 1977 in Bayside, Queens. And that couple happened to be sitting in the car, and they were talking about, hey, isn't that crazy? There's this Son of Sam killer out there. And then they were shot. And they both survived. So these are the victims. These are the murder victims of the Son of Sam, or the 44 caliber killer, as he was called at the time. Stacy Moskowitz was the final victim. She was killed in July of 1977, and she was the only one who did not have dark hair. And she was shot with her boyfriend, and he was permanently blinded from the. So these were serious crimes. He was murdering people. He was permanently injuring them. Many of the victims are still alive today, and they still have the effects of these shootings. So, as I said, at the April killing, there was a letter that was left behind, and this is the actual letter here. And this is the first letter where he calls himself the Son of Sam. He says, I'm a monster, I'm the Son of Sam, I'm a little brat. And he just left that at the scene. And the police find this, and they're like, okay, this is the first thing that they have related to this guy. And these are a couple of the, I don't know if that's not showing up in there, but the composites are a couple of the different pictures of the killers. I don't know if that looks like, they don't look too much alike to me.
No.
Okay, so let's go. So these are more composites. Now, I remember, so I'm a big fan of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, I know.
The original Robert Stack.
Let's make that clear.
Let's make that clear, yeah. So they did a two-part look into the Son of Sam. And I just remember they showed these composites, and it seemed so scary. There's something about these composites.
That guy is out there.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
Composites never look.
They're just.
They don't ever look friendly.
They don't, exactly. So these are actual composites that were drawn by witnesses or by the victims of the attacker in the Son of Sam killings. And even at the time, some of the police officers were like, these composites don't appear to resemble each other very much. And there's some that do, so like this one here and this one maybe look alike, but there's a lot of differences between them too. And they were trying to figure out why, and they said, okay, it could be because when victims sit down and with a sketch artist, it could be like days afterwards, and they could be the emotional trauma of being involved in a violent crime like that could affect how they remember. But there were just a lot of differences in the composites, which this is a little bit of foreshadowing. We're gonna come back and talk about this in a little bit. Okay. Sure. Yeah, so this was the original letter. And it's also interesting, he refers to himself as Mr. Monster at the very end. I don't know why my mouse is not showing up on there. But
your mouse is
yeah. So he talks a little bit about like why he's doing these things. His Papa Sam is keeping him in the attic, and he's telling him to do these things. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's really the first thing that police have from the killer. And
It's almost like a kid wrote it.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because there's a second letter, and we're going to talk about maybe some of the differences between the two. So there's the composite. Okay, so speaking of the second letter, here's the second letter. And it starts off, hello from the gutters of NYC. So this was sent to Jimmy Breslin. Anybody remember Jimmy Breslin? He was a reporter for the New York Daily News. And the New York Daily News really became a part of this story, right? So I listened to this, I was watching the Netflix series, and they talked about how at the time in New York City, so in the mid-70s, there were 3 big newspapers, right? So there's the New York Times, there's the Daily News, and there's the New York Post. And the Daily News was really, that was the one that was getting all the attention because the killer was writing to Jimmy Breslin. Also, fun fact about the New York Post.
I'm here for the fun fact.
I know. So it was actually bought during the Son of Sam by an Australian media person. Any guesses as to who that was? Rupert Murdoch bought the New York Post in 1976. And that actually, I didn't include this in here, but that actually becomes a part of the story too later on. So anyway, so this was the letter that Jimmy Breslin received.
The handwriting's different.
The handwriting is different. Yeah, the handwriting is different. And actually, I remember reading this, and I can't remember where it was from, or maybe it was on that Netflix documentary. The people who read this letter, like police investigators, actually thought that somebody who wrote that letter might have had like an art background, or like or like had done calligraphy or something, because it looks very different.
It's like comic book
font.
Yeah.
You can spell.
They can spell. It makes more sense. It looks better. It's more,
And it's organized.
almost like more professionally written than
Yeah.
the first one. So that was the second letter, goes right to Jimmy Breslin. But there wasn't any mistake about who that was from. It was from the Son of Sam.
So there's no question that it was written by someone else. Like there's the Jack the Ripper letters that.
I think there's some, they're not sure if they were written by the same. I
Okay.
assume they are. They're just, both letters are attributed to the Son of Sam killer.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are just some of the headlines that the Daily News had. Like Jimmy Breslin is talking to the 44 killer through the news, because in the letters, the person who wrote the letters was referring to things that were in the newspaper. So this was like a way for them to speak back to the killer. And it was all over the news, right? This was just a big part. But there were actually some other things happening in New York City at the time, as you can imagine, in a city of, there's 8 million people in 2020, so let's say there were 7.5 million people.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
7 million people. So in 1977, there was this huge dance craze that was like sweeping the country. Anybody want to guess what that was? Disco, right? So the hottest club in New York City, or the hottest club in the country, was in New York City, and it opened in April of 1977. So yeah, right around the time that these killings were happening. I started looking into the history of the building that Studio 54 ended up in. It was actually really interesting. So Captain Kangaroo was actually filmed.
Oh, Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah, so CBS owned that building eventually. And they filmed a lot of like game shows there, like To Tell the Truth and Password.
So was this before or after the club?
This was before. So
Okay.
CBS owned that building
Okay.
in the 40s and 50s. As a radio, they would do like radio programs
Yeah.
there, and then they switched over to doing TV shows, which I thought was interesting to think about Captain Kangaroo being filmed in the same building as Studio 54. Like, that just seems really crazy. But Studio 54 just totally dominated. Like,
How
the
long was it
club
there
scene.
for? Do you know?
It was
Did
there
you get a chance to
until-
go there?
I never went. It was a little before my time, so yeah, it was only I was in, I think, second grade when it opened. So I'm not sure I would have made. They
think
were
that's an
really
excuse.
particular about who they let in, so I don't know if I would have made the cut. It closed in the 80s. Studio 54 had a lot of problems. There were a lot of. First of all, it was like the place to go if you're a celebrity, right? So if you're a celebrity, if you're big in the 70s, if Liza Minnelli's there, Halston is there, like all these things. Jackie Kennedy is there.
Jackie Kennedy.
She was there, yeah. The Rolling Stones were there, all these people. But there was also, maybe not surprisingly, a little drug use going on there. And yeah, so there was a lot of, so it basically.
Experimentation, for
Yeah,
example?
all kinds of things. So anyway, so that was like the hottest thing dance-wise in the 70s. So at the same time that these things were going on, there was also a mayoral primary heating up. And a lot of really big names, one of whom went on to become the governor of New York, was actually running in the mayoral primary. In 1975, New York City in the mid-70s was really in a big, like, financial crisis. Like, they just had a lot of problems. The city was in trouble. And this is famous. Gerald Ford didn't actually tell the city to drop dead, but it was along those lines. And so in the summer of 1977, there was this big mayoral primary featuring Abraham Beame, who was the governor, or who was the mayor at the time. Bella Abzug was a congresswoman. Mario Cuomo, our future governor, was also running for mayor, and Ed Koch, who was the winner, and he went on to serve as mayor of New York City for the next 11 years.
How many of those pins do you own?
I don't own any of these. These
Okay.
are all, I took those all out. Those are all. But
Carrie's
they-
a collector of
I am a collector of political
pins.
members. Yeah. I don't think I have any, but I do have a couple of Mario Cuomo's, but not from when he was mayor. But so that was also on the periphery while all these things were happening with the Son of Sam. Okay, so now we're going to get to July of 1977 when everything just blew up. All kinds of things were happening. So the Son of Sam commits the final killing on July 31st. The police department, NYPD, was feeling just a tremendous amount of pressure to figure out who this person was, to find him. The police department had been dealing with all kinds of financial problems as well because of the city's financial problems. So they were really under a lot of pressure to solve this crime. Anybody a baseball fan here? The Yankees? Okay, so the Yankees in 1977, total mess. Reggie Jackson and Billy Martin hated each other. They were constantly fighting. But here's another fun fact. I'm just full of fun facts tonight. So believe it or not, New York City actually hosted the All-Star Game in 1977 with all these other things happening. The All-Star Game came to town. So the National League won. And the Yankees that year, despite all of their turmoil, all of the problems they were having on their team, they went on to win the World Series. So that was the last time in MLB that the team that hosted the All-Star game won the World Series. So that's a great trivia thing. Actually, there's a program on baseball right after this, so you can go to that and impress everybody with that baseball fact. So they were also experiencing a heat wave that summer, and there was a lightning strike on July 13th that knocked the power out for almost the entire city of New York for 2 days. So this is a picture in that bottom right-hand corner of what the city looked like when they had no. And so that led to all kinds of problems with like looting and arson. There was a lot of crime. And so it just seemed like New York City was just, there were a mess. It was a mess. July of 1977 was a mess. And then they lost the All-Star game too, so it's just, forget it. Okay. So as I said, the final killing that's attributed to the son of Sam happened in Brooklyn on July 31st. And it killed Stacy Moskowitz and injured Robert Violante, and he was permanently blinded. He was shot in the head and permanently blinded. So there was a witness to that shooting who actually heard the gunshots and I believe saw somebody running away. And a couple days after the killing, she contacted the police and said, hey, by the way, at the time of that shooting, there were other police officers in the area that were issuing parking tickets. So maybe that might be something that would be a great lead.
Yeah, interesting.
So they find this is the car that belonged to David Berkowitz, that big 1970s Ford Galaxy. It was double parked in front of a fire hydrant. Can you imagine driving that car? Look how big that is. Look at that. Look at that engine.
Of course it was
Double parked
in front of a fire hydrant.
So this is his actual car. It was kept actually in police headquarters for a long time. So they look into it and they find that it belongs to a Yonkers resident named David Berkowitz.
Okay.
So who is David Berkowitz? David Berkowitz had an interesting beginning. He was actually born Richard David Falco, and his parents were unmarried, so he was put up for adoption. And he was adopted by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, who swapped his first and middle names. Okay. So he was born Richard David, but then when he was adopted, he went by David Richard Berkowitz. Okay. And he had always been told by his adoptive parents that his mother died while giving birth to him, and that really affected him. Because he felt a lot of, I'm the reason my mother died. I killed my mother. Yeah. It turned out that wasn't true. They lied to him. Yeah. So that led to a.
But it was like they thought it was like a harmless way of.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
Telling
it was. And then he found out that they had lied to him his whole life, and he had a very difficult relationship with his adoptive parents. He did reconnect with his mother, but I don't think there was a relationship there either. Yeah. So he was in trouble for a long time in his teens. Committed a lot of petty crimes. Was really into arson. Also did like robberies, that kind of stuff. He did go into the Army. He spent 3 years in the Army, most of it in South Korea. He was an excellent marksman. Go figure. Yeah. He was honorably discharged. And then once he got out of the service, comes back to New York City, and he's bouncing around from job to job. Had a difficult time finding something permanent. And then he was working at the U.S. Post Office at the time of the Son of Sam killings. Now, he was living in Yonkers at the time. And he was known to the Yonkers Police Department because he was bad news. And he was also having an ongoing dispute with somebody else who lived in his apartment building. Okay. Also not surprising. He seems like the kind of guy who would have a lot of problems with his fellow tenants. Acting on a lead from the parking ticket, the task force that's in charge of investigating the Son of Sam killings reaches out to the Yonkers Police Department to get help bringing him in for questioning. So in a kind of a weird coincidence, one of the detectives calls the Yonkers Police Department and speaks to a dispatcher whose name is Wheat Carr. Okay. First name is Wheat, like wheat.
Like what? Please explain.
And so the police officer must have said, hey, or the detective said, hey, I'm calling because I'm trying to get some information on David Berkowitz. And she says, oh, I know him. He's my neighbor. He killed, my father's name is Sam, and David Berkowitz killed his dog. Ooh. So they're like, oh. Now we definitely want to speak to this guy. Yeah, they think, Like I said, they were already familiar with him, and he was arrested on the evening of August 10th. So there were police officers watching him, watching his apartment, watching his car. They saw a gun or part of the gun in his vehicle and other things like maps and boats, like things that looked like they would be related to this. And they were actually waiting to get a search warrant to get into the vehicle to look around and see what was in there. And they're waiting for that while he comes out of his apartment and they just arrest him on the spot. Okay. And he says, You got me, when they arrested him. And then the rumor is that he said, what took you guys long?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not, so that's, there's not, it's, some people say he said that, some people said he didn't. So he's immediately arrested, and it doesn't take him long. He's taken to like police headquarters, and he pretty quickly confesses to the crimes and says he did it at the behest of his neighbor's dog.
Okay.
Yeah, which,
So where does he live in relation to, like, you said the Queens?
he lived in
Brooklyn?
Yonkers.
Yonkers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I think his apartment building like backed up to where the cars lived. So the Wheat car had two brothers, John and Michael, that we're also going to talk about. So they knew each other. They had a familiarity. He's investigated before he goes to trial. And he's found to be mentally competent to stand trial. His attorneys are like, I don't know if that's true. You should plead guilty by reason of insanity or whatever. And he refused to do that. And he pled guilty to 6 counts of murder. At the sentencing, he actually was really disruptive and started screaming about Stacy Moskowitz and tried to jump out of a window. So he obviously has some issues, but he was sentenced to 25 years for each count of murder. So he got 150 years for the murder, and I believe he got an additional 150 years for the other attacks as well.
Okay.
And he has been bounced around in prisons. He was at Attica for a while. I know. Right?
Visited him.
I know. He hasn't been there. He has not been in Attica for a while. And I don't think it was a pleasant experience for him at Attica, which
Are any of them a
I don't
pleasant
think anybody has a good experience at Attica. So he's now at this correctional facility in Walco, which I believe is over by Poughkeepsie, exactly,
Okay.
of New York State.
That's too far.
Yeah, that's too far. Yeah. I'm not sure I'd want to go visit him either. I mean,
I know.
yeah. So by New York State law, he's eligible for parole every 2 years. And he was just up for parole in May of this year.
Oh, okay.
And he was denied parole, just in
Okay.
case you're wondering. So he'll probably never get out of jail. He has said that he doesn't go to every parole hearing. He takes the parole hearing opportunities to express a lot of remorse for what he did.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he actually has turned his life around in prison. He's converted to evangelical Christianity.
Okay.
And he calls himself the Son of Hope, not the Son of Sam. Take that for what I'm just putting that out there for what it is.
He should have just tried to get away from son of whatever altogether and
Yeah.
did something completely different and cut all ties.
Yeah. Yeah. He named himself the Son of Sam in that first letter. Yep. And Sam was his neighbor, Carr. Sam Carr was the neighbor, and it was his dog that he believed was telling him to do these things. So this is normally where I would say, hey, thanks for coming. Does anybody have any questions? But no, we're going to keep going. So I want to introduce you to Maury Terry. So Maury Terry was a native of New York City and roughly the same age as David Berkowitz. He was a writer for IBM. So you think of IBM
Okay,
as
I
like-
just don't like that picture.
I know, so that's why I put
creepy.
it on there. It's weird. Yeah, so that's why I'm using that picture because, okay, so
I'm gonna see it
anyway.
in my dreams tonight.
You talk about people who become obsessed with something, and like sometimes it has a negative connotation, right? He absolutely was obsessed with the Son of Sam killing. He's completely obsessed with it. Spent the rest of his adult life. He left IBM. He was a writer for IBM. IBM wrote, I don't know, articles. And I just thought of IBM.
Manuals?
No, they weren't manuals. They were like magazines or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he was a writer for them. I didn't realize they even had writers like that. And basically devoted left IBM, devotes the rest of his life to the Son of Sam. And he is just absolutely convinced that David Berkowitz did not act alone. Just convinced
Oh, I
beyond
thought you
a
were gonna tell me he did it.
No, he didn't do it. No, but he spent all of his time.
He looks like he did it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he did. But do you want to hear? I heard this was in the Netflix show it was a 4-episode series, and I could only make it through 2 episodes because it just got too weird for me. But so Maury Terry never married, didn't have any children, but he took somebody on a date, and this woman was talking about their date, and she said they went out to dinner, and then he said, "Hey, do you want to go see where one of the Son of Sam victims was killed?" So they went to this bench and sat on this bench where I was like, okay.
How many of you would go with
Okay,
a guy
that's
that
weird.
has-
Even for, I'm like, that's weird. She seemed to be on board with it. I'm like, okay,
They get
you're
married?
weird. You deserve each other. They did not get married.
Okay.
No. So he actually wrote a book called The Ultimate Evil. And he had this theory that the Son of Sam killings were related to Satanism. And it was like a nationwide conspiracy. And there were all these different groups. And also included the Manson family. which was really interesting because I did a lot of research on the Manson family. I never heard anything about that. I'm a little skeptical on some of his claims. And actually, on the Unsolved Mysteries thing, they interviewed him twice. He was interviewed in both parts. It was basically like, hey, Maury Terry is saying this guy didn't act alone. He had multiple.
Is that guy
people.
still around?
No, he died. He died in 2015. Yeah.
Was he unmarried?
He was unmarried, had no children. He, honestly, I don't think he had any other interest than the Son of Sam killing. I mean, that was it. That was it for him. And so, like, when you talk about people
So he left IBM and did nothing else?
He studied the Son of Sam killings. That was basically all he did, really.
You can make a living at that?
He wrote a book, right?
Yeah.
And then he was on Unsolved Mysteries. He spent a lot of time.
He was on Unsolved Mysteries.
So that he made the big time. So
that was it. That was his goal in life.
That was it. Yeah. That he peaked when he was on with Robert Stack. No, he just spent a lot of time studying the Son of Sam killings.
So this picture,
yeah,
is it just like a video camera?
Yeah, it's like he's standing in front of. Yeah, it's like.
Why is he staring at it like that?
Because I have no idea. I purposely used this picture because he looks weird. Okay. All right,
moving on.
Yeah, okay. So I had it, the original part was just his head, and I was like, that's even too weird for me.
No, it's standing there and staring at a security camera.
I know. Unfortunately for him, this is the picture people use a lot of him because he looks a little weird, really. Yeah. Okay. So I do want to talk about a couple of his theories, because I don't think...
I'm just wondering if he was still alive today, would he be using that as his dating profile?
Who knows? Maybe he looks in that as, yeah, man, that's great. I look really good in that.
I look real dapper there.
I look at me. I mean, it's like my whole body is out of proportion. Look at my feet. My feet are like this big. Anyways, okay, moving on.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about his theories, which I do think some of them are
valid,
have some validity to them. Not all of them. Because honestly, as I was saying, there's this Netflix show called The Sons of Sam, and it is based on his writings and his research, and Paul Giamatti, the actor, narrates the show as if he is Maury Terry.
Oh, okay.
Which is also a little weird. And honestly, I had to give up after episode 2, because I was like, this is just becoming so strange and going down the rabbit hole into offshoots of Scientology, and I was like, I don't think
is that what was happening?
I don't think I can stick around. I'm going to stick with the Unsolved Mystery, like the 10-minute version of these things. So these are some of the reasons he thinks there were more than one killer. It's not just one. It's not just David Berkowitz. The different composite drawings. I think even if you are not maybe a believer that there were multiple, those composite drawings do not look. There's enough differences in those composite drawings. Eyewitnesses had different testimony of what they saw. Sometimes they saw a guy who looked like David Berkowitz, who was like 5'9" and a little overweight. And sometimes they saw a guy who was 6'3" with blonde hair. So those are clearly not the same person. David Berkowitz has claimed that he both acted alone and was part of an organized group.
Okay.
So he's indicated both things. He's hedged with the truth a little bit. And then the Breslin letter, which was not actually released to the public when it was not, the whole letter wasn't published in the Daily News and released to the public. So he mentioned some things in this letter which really sent Maury Terry off on all of these tangents. He thinks the gutters of NYC refers to the aqueduct that was in a park in Yonkers, where there was some evidence that there was some, I don't know,
human sacrifices?
Dog sacrifices.
Dog sacrifices,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Like legitimate. Yeah, that really was happening. And he mentioned some people in this letter. The John Wheaties was a nickname for John Carr, who was the son of Sam Carr, who's their neighbor. And then both John Carr and his brother Michael Carr died very suddenly and unexpectedly in weird ways. And so he thinks they were part of the conspiracy and were killed.
But by the others in the group?
By the others in the group, or by some...
But, so there's been no other killings like this.
So that's what people say. They're like, okay, so the Son of Sam killing stopped when David Berkowitz was arrested and put in jail. So that should be your best evidence.
There's no other letters that come out with another murder somewhere else in the country that says Son of Sam.
No, nobody wrote to Jimmy Breslin. Nobody was shot with a .44 revolver. Like, those crimes stopped when David Berkowitz was arrested. So that's the best evidence that you have the guy. That's the killer. So
when did the Carr brothers die?
In the late 70s. So shortly after David Berkowitz was put in jail, John Carr died by suicide in North Dakota.
Okay.
And then Michael Carr died on, there's an expressway on the east side of Manhattan. I forget which one it was, but he was killed he was speeding and he died in a car accident.
Hutchinson.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Did you look into why he killed himself, why he committed suicide?
He was in North Dakota.
So it was, wait, what'd they say? What'd you say?
Because he was in North Dakota.
Yeah, it could have been. Actually, so it was, I'm not sure if the official ruling was suicide. I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail, but I will say it involved a rifle in his head. But they're not sure if he was shot or he shot himself. But it was incredibly bloody and gory, I guess. So those are the basic things. I don't want to go too far into Jimmy Urtu and Maury Terry's rabbit holes of conspiracies, because as we've said many times, I tend to think the easiest explanation is probably the truest one, and the easiest explanation is David Berkowitz did this. Now, whether he did it because he had a mental illness, or there's some theory that he did it because he was angry with women, he had a bad relationship with his mother and his adopted mother, he was not popular, he did not have a girlfriend, there's all these things. Do I think that his neighbor's dog told him to do it? No.
Oh, you don't think that?
I don't think that. No. All right. But more importantly, what do you think?
Are you asking me?
Anybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. The bullets all matched the same, the 44 Bulldog. Yeah. So the bullets all matched, and he confessed pretty quickly. And honestly, I remember, I think it was in the Netflix documentary, after they solved this case, that was they had the most promotions in the New York Police Department they'd ever had, because there were so many people working on that. They just were so glad that it was over, and people worked really hard to try to bring this to closure, and they were all very happy when he was arrested. They just attributed both letters to him, and there wasn't really an explanation as to why the letters look so different. If it was me, I would say 2 different people wrote those letters.
Right.
That would be and I'm not an expert, but... So that makes you think, okay, who's the other person who wrote the letter? Was he or she also involved in this? Yeah, I guess what I would say is I think policing in 1976 and 77 was maybe a little bit different than it is now. And I'm not being critical of police officers, because I think they have a really hard job to do. I just think that maybe things that we would do today are different than what happened in the mid-70s. They didn't have the technology. They would have been able to do some handwriting, and maybe they did. I just never saw anything about that. I think there was...
And then he confessed.
And he confessed really quickly. And
Yeah.
he was just no, I did it. I did it because the dog told
Well,
me.
he's still alive. We can ask for a handwriting sample.
Sure. Yeah, maybe we should do that.
Yeah, we'll write to him. Let's write to him
yeah,
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
See what we get back.
Yeah. Sure. Let's do it. Yeah,
You need the
let's do it.
handwriting,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, he was an excellent marksman. Because some of these people were shot from the side, some from behind. Yeah, I don't know. Also, a good question. So there's still a lot of questions out, even though this case is 50 years old, almost 50.
Yeah.
50 years old in 2027. Still some questions.
DNA now.
Maybe if they still have those, if they kept the evidence from the crime scenes, yeah. I have not heard. I think once they arrested him and he confessed, he goes to trial, he's convicted, he's sent to prison, they were done. They were just done.
Yeah.
They were done with it, and they were moving on. Honestly, the 70s in New York City, there was a lot of crime, so that was not the only issue that they were dealing with. Again, not being critical of New York City, just there were a lot of issues there.
Most of the forensics that we're talking about wasn't until the late 90s, early 2000s. DNA, not until 2010 was it really viable. So they probably didn't save those things properly to be able to do that today anyways.
Could be, because they didn't know in 1977 what they'd be able to get off shards of glass or any clothing or
Or would you really save something of a person who confessed to it?
Right.
How many examples are, that box got lost in a fire?
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. So
If the bullets matched his gun and matched each other, and he confessed, and it stops,
Yep.
you're done.
Yeah, exactly. That's the end of. That's the end. We can pack it all up.
Is that what Maury Terry thinks?
And then Maury Terry was on the case for the next 40 years. So
I
for
lived
35 years.
in New York City at
Okay.
this time.
So what do you remember about it?
And the whole city just said, great, it's done.
It's done.
Let's
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
Nobody cared about knowing anything more. They got him, put him away. We can all
I think there was a tremendous
go
amount
watch
of.
the Yankees.
Yeah, they can watch the Yankees. I think there was a tremendous amount of fear from people who lived in New York City because it was so random, and it was like, oh, the perpetrator is looking for women with long dark hair. I'm going to cut my hair because I don't even want to be.
I don't look like that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be a target.
But there wasn't
Ramirez
a
Yeah.
in California.
Yeah, right.
I lived there then.
Oh, okay.
And one of his victims were killed like about 2 miles from where I
Okay.
live. That's all that the women thought about.
Yeah, it's very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, very scary.
There was a big divide then, though, because Manhattan was Manhattan, and the other boroughs were the other boroughs, and it wasn't happening in Manhattan.
It only happened in the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, I think. Yeah, so.
Well, and he's not taking the ferry to Staten Island. So.
Yeah, no, not doing that. Not doing
That was
that.
too much work.
So the interesting thing when he was arrested, so the Yonkers Police Department thought he might have been a suspect in some other crimes that were happening, and he was an arsonist. He had committed like thousands of arsons in the New York City area, and that actually started in his teens. He had a real problem with setting fires. It just was a lot of problems, a lot of issues growing up, developmentally, a lot of issues. But anyways.
Did his mom or adopted mom have brown hair or look like the women that?
So there is a picture of his adoptive mom on here. Let me go back here. It's hard to tell. This is,
Can't zoom in.
sorry. So this bottom picture here in the corner, that is his bar mitzvah.
Can you use the magnifying glass,
maybe.
or does that do
Let's
something
see.
else? Ooh.
There we go. So yeah, she's got shorter brown hair. He had a lot of issues with the women in his life. As an adult, he didn't have a lot of women in his life outside of his adoptive mother, who died of cancer, and then his biological mother, who he was told died giving birth to him, which was a lie, and then they did not have a relationship after that. But and then he was just devastated when he found out the truth, because he was like, I've spent my whole life feeling this tremendous guilt for killing my mother, and it turns out she's been alive the whole time.
Were they still alive when these killings happened, or did they die after?
His adoptive mother was already passed away. His adoptive father, I believe, was still alive. I'm not sure about his biological mother. I think she was still alive as well. And there was no relationship with his biological father, who I believe was married at the time that he was married to somebody else at the time he was born. He was just a complicated guy with a lot of problems.
What do you do when you've been told that your mom died giving birth to you? Find out it was a lie.
I think it was,
She's dead. What do you do with yourself?
it was really hard for him. He felt completely violated by his adoptive parents that told him this story, and it turned out, and then he internalizes that guilt. He's acting out because of it. And then it turns out it wasn't true.
They thought it was a better story than like saying your mom didn't want you.
Exactly. What's worse?
Yeah.
Did he go in the army home instead of being in juvenile detention, or?
Possibly. He must have gone in. He was discharged in 74, so I think he went in the 70s, in 71, which I believe is after the draft had ended, although I don't. Okay. So my guess is maybe he was one of these guys who was like, look, you're either going to go into the army, or you're going to go into the service, or you're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case. Or he was looking
for some direction.
looking for some direction in life. And hey, actually what I read was he really wanted to go to Vietnam, which is unusual because I don't think a lot of people in 1971 wanted to go to Vietnam, but he did. And I think it's because he really wanted to kill people. So, yeah. But he didn't end up in Vietnam. He went to South Korea instead. So. And he got in trouble in the army, too. He was not, he was...
I think they still had the draft in 71.
Did they?
71 was
Okay.
kind of the end of Vietnam.
What's that?
71 was the end.
Yeah, I don't know if the draft was still around then, or... I never read that he was drafted, so...
73 or 4.
Yeah.
This says 75.
Okay.
Because I had issues in 71.
So, anyways, he got in the army. He was honorably discharged. He did have some issues in the service, but they weren't enough to give him a dishonorable discharge or anything like that. So,
It's probably worth keeping him.
yeah,
He said he was an excellent marksman.
he was an excellent marksman, although he wasn't doing a whole lot in South Korea. So,
All true.
So that's that. Anybody want to look at Maury Terry one
No,
more time?
I don't.
Any other questions or thoughts? Or
Has there been anybody that's interviewed him to help with forensic psychology or anything like that?
I think he's been interviewed off and on. If you Google on YouTube, he's interviewed in different news programs and things like that. He gives different stories sometimes. Sometimes he would act alone. Sometimes he was acting with other people. I think he talks a lot about what he's doing with his life now, which is trying to be a good influence on people, practicing his faith. Yes.
Do you know what unit he was in South Korea?
I
was
don't.
just wondering because my dad was in South Korea.
Oh, okay.
Around that same time.
Maybe they were
Okay,
bunkmates.
yeah, maybe.
My father never mentioned that.
Okay.
He probably would have.
Yeah, I would think that people would remember David Berkowitz. Yeah, I don't know what I don't know. I'm not even sure. Yeah, exactly.
He's a
what-
fireman, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yes.
Another question.
Sure.
Because he's up for parole every 2 years, is there a chance that he could get released and?
I think anything is possible. I would be shocked if he was ever released from prison. But then again,
there would be a big uproar.
Oh, I just think that would I don't think people would.
But I wonder, are people still showing up to the parole hearings?
Maybe, yeah. He doesn't always go to the parole
Yeah, I know.
hearings. So I'm not sure. Maybe some of the victims go there and say, look, I've been blinded for 40 years. Don't ever let this guy out of prison.
Yeah.
I say that I guess I would predict that he would not be, but then Leslie Van Houten was released on
Right.
parole. And she was involved in 3 murders, or the murder of 3 people. So I think anything's possible. I find it highly unlikely that he would ever be released on parole.
So how
my
old
guess
is-
is he's in his 70s.
Okay.
He'll die in prison is my guess.
He's 71.
Yeah. I think he'll die behind bars. That would be my prediction. I just think the outcry of releasing the son of Sam would
I
be
know.
so great when there's still victims that are still alive. and
Yeah.
people remember that. People here remember what it was like living through that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it. But that's just me. And I'm happy. I'm okay with him staying behind bars. I don't have any problem with that. Any other thoughts? Any questions? Hopefully this was worth it. Hopefully it was
Yeah,
interesting.
nice job.
Yeah.
Another crime in the 70s.
Yeah, another crime of the 70s. Yeah, thanks.
Makes me glad I wasn't around in the 70s. It
I know.
sounds
I don't
like.
remember anything about this. Nothing. Never heard of it. Thanks, Mom. My mom was here, so she probably hid the newspapers from me. Although so my mom grew up in New Jersey, and I do remember being in New York City in like the mid 70s. But yeah, not.
You made it out.
We survived. Yeah, we made it. Yeah. So, anyways, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Don't
And
forget.
so there is no podcast next month because it's
just the
really the
expo.
Crime Expo on
Yep.
October 19th.
Yep. October 19th. Yep.
So we hope to see you all then. Sign up.
Yeah, definitely get yourself registered. There we go.
He's going to watch all you leave.
Yeah. Say goodbye to Maury. Seriously, I had to stop watching that because he's so weird.